This battle will be my masterpiece.
Number 5. Level up path and ability explanation, runes, and masteries. The passive Bloodwell. Effectively a guardian angel. Upon using an ability that costs health, he will store that value in the well. Upon taking fatal damage, Bloodwell procs, healing him for that value. When out of combat for over 5 seconds, the Bloodwell ticks down. You can circumvent this by using E whenever it's off cooldown. You can also get a minor attack speed boost in relation to the Bloodwell value, but it's pretty minimal. In short, the passive is generally pretty lackluster, seeing only limited use and only when you mess up, acting as a sort of get out of jail free card. But it is technically an essential part of the kit, so learning to use it effectively is important. I will go much more in depth about Bloodwell soon. Level up E, the Blades of Torment first, always, in every situation. Send out 2 lines to damage and slow. It's initially quite difficult to aim and use effectively, but with time it will become second nature. I feel it's sort of because no other champion really has this kind of aiming where it's like a triangle out in front of you. It's a bit strange, but you will definitely in time figure out how to use it accurately. But something you need to keep in mind though is that it does take time to get to you to the point you placed at. So it takes a bit of leading, especially when you're trying to get that max range, which is also why it's so difficult. A lot of abilities, slow me abilities, go immediately or nearly immediately, but Blades of Torment takes actually surprisingly long amount of time. For the jungle, area of effect damage for efficient clearing, and then when you go into gank you'll have your crowd control slow. Max first because with ranks it becomes a reduced cooldown, increasing damage and a longer duration slow, all of which are immensely useful. If you're playing top and mid, use for harass and CSing. Max first if you're in good control of the lane, or in other words you need the constant pushing, which in turn will create immense map pressure preventing roams from the enemy mid laner, or top laner. Or maybe you just need the wave clear because you're constantly being pushed, missing creeps. Normally not essential to max. Take W, or Bloodthirst Blood Price second. When it's toggled off, your auto attacks will siphon health every third proc. When toggled on, you instead deal extra damage in exchange for damaging yourself. You can toggle this ability immediately, including mid-swing animation. When below half health, your health siphon is greatly increased. In the jungle, Bloodthirst is your main sustain tool. You should never die in the jungle under normal circumstances. Blood Price is useful for fast clearing. I will go more in depth about using this ability soon, but in short, max second. W is powerful, but E levels more efficiently for junglers. In top and mid, it's good for lane sustain and all-ins, typically max first. E isn't used often in lane, for fear of unintentional wave pushing, making W more valuable despite the lackluster gains per level. Take Q, or Dark Flight, last. You leap into the sky and then crash downwards at the designated location. The damage, and gains per level, isn't great, but the knock-up is. Q is your main gap closer and crowd control, but note that it can be cancelled mid-flight. In the jungle, it's simply your gap closer, and the crowd control is just a bit of a bonus, but the damage is nominal, so you max it last. Keep in mind that you can use this to jump over walls, like at Dragon. At top and mid, it's useful for all-ins, setting up ganks, or just escaping. It can be used for harass, but it is risky. Still, max it last. And then finally put a point in R, Massacre, whenever you can. Deal damage all around you and fill up your blood well for each champion hit. In addition, for 12 seconds you gain attack speed and attack range. In the jungle, it has a fairly limited use in general. It's typically used in ganks for a bit more firepower. Sometimes, however, I just use it to quickly take down objectives like turrets and Dragon. At top and mid, similarly, this isn't a huge ultimate for laning either. It's useful for all-ins or for taking turrets. The rune pages. A standard attack damage spread will do just fine. Replace the attack damage quenched with attack speed if you have them. This applies to both lane and jungle Aatrox. With the masteries, 8-12-0 Fervor or Battle. Fervor will help both in the jungle and laning for more damage. Just make sure to queue up stacks if you can. Number 4, item selection. In the jungle, you'd go something like Machete, Refillable Potion, and a Warding Totem. You go Refillable because you go back a lot, and the Totem is of course for early vision. The machete is for jungle clear, obviously. It's possible to go Doran's Blade, but you need to build into a machete for your Devourer anyway. Around mid-game, you want to have Stalker's Devourer, Ravenous Hydra, Blade of the Rune King, and Alacrity Mercury Treads. You take Stalkers because you don't need the sustain of Trailblazer, and the extra slow is nice. And then you go for the Devourer because it synergizes well with the W. A close second is Cinderhulk for more health and more tankiness. Blade of the Rune King is amazing on every level, and every stat given is useful. So it's a core item. Merc Treads is for some magic resist and tenacity. You can go Berserkers, but it's not totally necessary. For defensive options, you typically want to go for a Spirit Visage and a Randuin's Omen. Spirit Visage synergizes with your W, increasing the healing, and gives you nice stats. Randuin's Omen is a good armor option, but you can skip this as they have a very ability power focused team. In situational situations, Guardian Angel, Dead Man's Plate, and a Banshee's Veil are your options. I find Guardian Angel gimmicky on Aatrox, to be honest. Use it for fun, but it's not really a serious buy. Dead Man's Plate for a bit more damage, armor, and health, but it doesn't do any of them particularly well. And if you can't utilize the passive well, it's not really worth getting. For oppressive ability power enemies, pick up the Banshee's Veil. For damage situational items, you can go for Frozen Mallet, Death Stance, Bloodthirster, Maw of Malmortius, or Infinity Edge. Each of these work pretty well in Aatrox, so pick one and try it out to see if it matches your personal playstyle. Maybe you like more bruiser build, you can go for the Frozen Mallet or the Maw of Malmortius. Or if you want everything to just die, you go for Death Stance or Infinity Edge. For top and mid, it's fairly similar. You can go Doran's Blade or Cloth Armor, depending on your matchup, Health Potion, and a Warding Totem. If you're new or just, like I said, playing a bad matchup, go for the Cloth. Otherwise, Doran's Blade will work just fine. Always get a few HP pots to start, and a Warding Totem for that vision. Early game, you go for Boots, Tiamat, and Vampiric Scepter. These are early game essentials for wave clear, damage, and the extra HP siphon. Just like the jungle path, you go for Ravenous Hydra, Blade of the Rune King, Death Stance, and Alacrity Mercury Treads near the late game. This will give you more wave clear, damage, and HP siphon. Mark Treads for tenacity, and you can go Berserkers if you're ahead. Similarly, the Spirit Visage and Randuin's Omen are your defensive options. Always get Visage, but you can skip Randuin's. Situationally, you can go Guardian Angel or Banshee's Veil. And then, for the damage, you can go Frozen Mallet, Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, or Maw of Malmortius. Just pick the one you either like or fits the situation best. Now finally we're getting to the sections that are a bit more complicated and not typically covered in a lot of Aatrox guides, which is why I want to definitely specifically cover these because I feel they're extremely important, but not ever really covered. So at number 3, we have general playstyles. While Aatrox does have a lot of ways to go about playing him, they are quite simple and pretty much line up with what you already do, but on different champs. For example, when you play Malphite, you build HP and armor, then ult into the enemy team. Similarly, for Aatrox, you Dark Flight into the enemy team, then ult. This is called the initiator playstyle, or could even be called a class. The initiator. Probably the main class most Aatroxes should settle into. Aatrox is one of the best initiators in the entire game, rivaling the likes of even Malphite. His entire kit and general item path synergizes well with this playstyle. A typical combo looks like Dark Flight, or Q, into the grouped up enemy team, Massacre, or R, for the AoE damage and attack steroid, Blades of Torment, or E, for the AoE slow, and then you start attacking, hoping to HP siphon your way through a lot of damage and crowd control. When they probably and inevitably kill you, your Bloodwell procs giving you a second string of abilities and attacks. All the while you're doing damage, applying crowd control, and generally being a distraction, while the rest of your team can safely follow up. If you can hit a good Dark Flight and have a competent team, you should be winning team fights more often than not. If you don't have either of those, however, or you're just really far behind, you'll die immediately, having done nothing but feed over a kill and make defending a whole lot harder for your team. It's a difficult position to take up, and is bound to get people raging at you one time or another, for inevitably making mistakes, but it's well worth the risk. Knowing exactly when to initiate is a mechanic unique to Aatrox, so I won't get too in-depth here. Really, it would take an entire guide by itself. But really, it's just learning when you can and can't engage. Some questions to ask yourself. Is my team near enough to follow up? Are they distracted or ready to engage? It may help to tell them in the chat box what your plan is if they don't know or play with a lot of Aatroxes, which is quite common actually. Is the enemy team grouped up enough for a good dark flight into a massacre? If you can only hit one, that's not good enough. You need to be hitting 3 or plus more for optimal results. If you jump into the enemy team, assuming you can even make the jump that is, will they just kill or crowd control you immediately? Do they have significant disengage and just leave you hanging? It's a tough job to be the brains of the entire operation, but better you than some random, right? The split pusher. Alright, so the split pusher is a significantly easier job. Largely, this class assumes you have teleport, by the way, so you can join team fights across the map while you push the side lanes. Simply put, you pick a lane and kill any minions along the way. Make sure to have vision in vital areas like the river and jungle. And don't push up too far without the rest of your team being relatively as pushed up. If you lose vision of 3 or plus members of the enemy team, just back up and join your team until you get adequate vision. If there is a 4-1 split, remind your team to place a ward as soon as the fight starts so you can TP to it. If you don't have your teleport, don't split push. It's likely the enemy team will know this and try to engage 5v4 on your team, and then you're both screwed. You should be able to take at least one person in a duel, but if there are 2 or more, just dark flight away. Aatrox's strength is not for facing 2 people at once. Only fight uneven fights if you're going to die anyway, or if your team is otherwise getting something better in return, like an inhibitor or Baron. Ravenous Hydra or equivalent is necessary for fast pushing. The Baron or Rift Herald buff also helps that. If you can get free hits on a turret, then go for it, but keep in mind that you are just a constant source of map pressure. If the enemy team leaves you alone, you'll take a lot, but until then, don't risk them collapsing on you for free. Keep your blood well full by using E whenever it's up if needed, and ult towers for increased attack speed. If your team is really behind, don't try and split push. They'll just get engaged on, under turret or not, and you need to be there. The Protector. This is more of a subclass, but I'll give it a bit of attention anyway. Essentially, if you have an MVP on your team, or in other words, a hyper carry, or just someone who's straight up really good at this game, Aatrox has a lot of CC and burst damage while remaining tanky to help those valuable persons. An example of this is something crazy like a 10-0 Tristana. Her damage is already huge. Her damage when fed is massive, but she's also really squishy. Protecting a carry like that is more important than anything. They can destroy the other enemy team in seconds, so long as they're alive. So, being a team player that you are, you opt to stand by her side. From CSing in lane to going back to base. You follow and protect her and act as a guard against assassinations or whatever else. In team fights, whomever is directly targeting her needs to be taken out immediately. Start with the Dark Flight to knock them up for a precious second and follow with Blades of Torment for the slow. Then, just burn them down. You dying is perfectly fine so long as the carry lives on. Remember that. It's really tough to say when you should protect as opposed to do something else. After all, if you're just following somebody around, you're just not doing anything. It's just an experience thing, really. Largely, hyper carries need protection, especially if they're your only damage source. The Jungle Menace. For junglers, this one comes up naturally. You control the area between the lanes with no exceptions. Control vision, control buffs, timers, control dragons, scuttles, heralds, barons, and whatever else. This could also be counter jungling with an emphasis on stealing creep from the enemy jungler, or just killing scuttles for vision every time it revives. If it's in the jungle, it's your business. Typically, however, if you go full on jungle menace, you're probably not interacting with the lanes very much. A lack of creep wave or turret control to a lack of ganking can set your team back if they're not able to do it themselves. If they are able to go it alone, and then you have a huge advantage. If not, a huge disadvantage. Also, there's something to be said about the inevitable force of morale. If your team never sees or hear from you, they may start to rage, lowering morale for the other team members. It may give the enemy team a confidence boost, or they could just even quit. It helps to communicate with your team, or if just give them a pity gank every once in a while. Although good players will know if you're doing well enough to warrant the isolation. If you're getting free dragons left and right and preventing enemy ganks, then that is enough to tide them over. Jungle Menace is one of the most difficult and risky taxes to pull off, but can be rewarded immensely. Also, it's relatively stress-free due to the lack of constant dueling, and is quite dependent on your own player skill, making it a pretty fun one to play. One-man army. My favorite and probably most used tactic in all my Aatrox games. One-man army combines pretty much every playstyle into one neat little package. This only comes with massive amounts of experience both in-game micro and macro strategies. Don't approach this as a newbie. Basically, one-man army is just as it sounds. You are whatever your team needs you to be at any time. From Jungle Menace taking dragons and counter juggling 1 minute, to protecting a hypercarry and to initiating teamfights on the fly. Your playstyle and even build changes on a whim, and most accurately fits every situation. You need to already have a handle on everything else. That's not to necessarily say being a one-man army is a strictly good thing. If you keep changing the way you play in solo queue, your teammates won't be able to follow your lead and acclimate their playstyle as needed, and can waste a lot of time and burn your patience. In addition, if you don't have the skills needed, you're just doing a lot of different things poorly instead of just one tactic well. But if there's ever a skill ceiling to aim for, it's this one. So there's one more playstyle you may be looking for, and that's the Duelist or Reaper. Looking into his kit and item path, you may think it's best to just duel at every opponent and every opportunity. This is where this class would explain that in depth. Except you really shouldn't do that. League of Legends isn't Call of Duty or whatever. Objectives are what primarily matter, not kills. Kills are just secondary. Sure, you could be the Reaper guy, someone who just kills everyone in sight, allowing team members to take objectives for funsies, but it's not a long-term viable strategy. Also, dueling is a core aspect of all champions and every playstyle, and I don't have nearly enough time to get into the more minute details. As just a bit of a framework, Blood Price plus Massacre has a surprisingly high burst factor, and then you can switch to the massive HP regain at any moment. Utilizing W is essential, and I will go over that soon. Number 2. Playing the early, mid, and late game. For the jungle, in the early game you just gank heavily. Use your passive aggressively to snowball lanes. Retreat back into the jungle to farm in between passive use. So what this means is that you would come into the gank with your blood price, and it's going to be doing a lot of damage to you, but that's okay. You have your passive, you jump at the person, you get a couple swings to the blood price down, and the other enemy member, if they're not that great at least, they will turn around and try and all-in you while your teammate is catching up or dealing their own damage. And since the Blood Well passive takes 3 seconds to regain your health, there's no way that the enemy team member should be able to tank up 3 seconds of damage, including what you did at the beginning. So it almost always results in a kill. This can also be a good opportunity for you to tower dive, since you'll lose turret aggro upon going into the Blood Well. During the mid game, it's a combination of Jungle Menace and just ganking when you can. Keep in mind that around this time you should be able to solo dragon without too much of a problem. Also, you should be covering lanes when other team members go back. In the late game, fall into a general playstyle of your choice. The Jungle Menace is a good place to start when playing top and mid. In the early game, try and score a kill around level 2 or 3. That's a pretty massive power spike for you. Otherwise, play a bit on the safer side since Aatrox is surprisingly squishy and becomes increasingly item dependent. To not only do well, but to stay at all relevant. Experienced players can be aggressive and snowball lead. If under pressure, remember to use E as a method for wave clear or to catch CS. If you're completely outmatched or you're not able to get a kill or anything like that, just play it safe. It's not that big a deal. During the mid game, continue to farm well and then begin to fall into a general playstyle. Typically, Split Pusher is a pretty good one to go for. Just keep getting that creep score, and keep getting those big items. In the late game, decide what kind of role you need to do, and fill it. In the late game, Initiator is a good place to go, since you'll have your late game tanky items to help you out. And finally, number 1, using Bloodthirst, Blood Price effectively. It's so cliche to say this, but it really does separate the good Aatroxes from the bad Aatroxes. Knowing when to switch it effectively is critically important. If you cannot get this down, you should not be playing Aatrox, which is why I'm going to be going so in depth. Jungle, for the most part, stay in Thirst mode, and just as a reminder, Thirst is the one that heals you, and Price is the one that damages you for damage. For the most part, stay in Thirst mode to keep your HP topped off and ready for invades or ganks. If you like the thrill of the risk, you can keep it in Price until about 25% HP, and then heal it back up for Thirst. Your clear will be faster, but you will go into the ganks with low HP, or an untimely invade will kill you. Knowing the jungle matchup and general map pressure will help you determine what mode you can keep it in. For example, playing against someone like Udyr or Lee Sin or Master Yi, you can reasonably assume they may try to invade your jungle, mainly for the creep steal. But if they see you at low HP, you damn right they're going to try and attack you. If you have a high HP, they probably will just run away not wanting to risk a fight. Although you can use this as a baiting tactic, but that is extremely advanced play. When you're ready for a gank, get blood price ready by proccing 2 swings before you even arrive. This will allow your first hit to do the extra damage. It's a small detail that can lead to a massively increased DPS output, because blood price brings a surprising level of damage early on. Being able to continuously hit third procs is vitally important for kills. Continue to leave your price on, even if low, because you can just use your passive if you die. Your early ganks must get kills. Aatrox is built for early kills and needs them for his item dependent build. Come mid to late game, you can pretty much always keep it in price mode, as your items will heal the cost negating the effect. Of course, you will still need to stay on top of quick changes in combat. As a side note, also having price mode in combination with your ult can lead to very quick dragon kills. Being able to take the dragon alone and quickly is important and immensely helpful. As a side note, if you're on blue side, you can jump over the dragon wall, possibly negating any vision setup in that area. For example, wards placed in the river or scuttles will not see you. If you started red side, it may be worth it to go the long way, parallel to mid lane, and then going through the back of the dragon wall. For mid and top strategies, here's where W effectiveness really gets tricky as opposed to the fairly straightforward jungle section. And really, there isn't like a check or step list to go about. It's simply reading the situation and reacting appropriately, and this only comes with experience both in Aatrox, general game knowledge, and knowledge about other champs. This is pretty much why I would advise new Aatrox players to start in the jungle first and move to lanes later, although the trade-off is a more powerful character to control since your gold gain is generally much higher in lane. So I'll just start with some pointers. Your opponent can see when you switch between the 2 modes, so keep that little trick handy when you want to play mind games. For example, if your opponent is already a bit skittish, either due to their innate nature or you've been all-inning them a lot, you can switch the bloodthirst to scare them away from getting creep score. Sort of like a muscle fix or cocking a shotgun kind of thing. Another way of doing this is to preempt all of your all-ins with a W switch. That way the next time you switch, they will play defensively. But really, you're just playing mind games. This can also hurt you, however, if you're not careful. Switching the price right before a gank can give it away, so don't switch until you're ready to strike. It is instant after all. Steering away from tricks, typically just keep it in thirst mode to heal up on minions, allowing you to stay in lane much longer than most. Then, as soon as you engage the enemy, switch the price to start getting some big hits in, and only switch back to thirst if your health falls too low. The reason you don't start in thirst is because once your enemy sees those big, unnatural damage spikes, they will get scared and back off, giving you free damage, scaring them completely, or hopefully just a straight up kill. In certain situations, you certainly want to manage the W more carefully. For example, if the enemy is playing aggressive, you may want to constantly have thirst active for HP regain. Or if you want to force him away, you just have to have price active all the time as a scare tactic. Minion wave management is also a factor. Attacking the minions with price will push the wave unless your last hitting is on point. Similarly, if you want to proc thirst a lot for the HP regain, then you may want to hit the minions a lot, which will also push the wave. Later in the game, W manipulation becomes less important. Same as the jungle tactic stated, you just keep it in price until you actively need to heal in battle. That is it for the top 5 tips for playing Aatrox. I really and sincerely hope that this has made you a better Aatrox player, and really Aatrox could use a little bit of love. Some people think he's bland. I really cannot wrap my mind around it. I don't see at all where any of his kids is bland, but I don't think he's bland at all. I think he's a really fantastically designed champion. Could he use a tweak or maybe a minor rework? Absolutely. But at his core, he's a god of war. He goes into battle and he inspires these people to just fight to the death. Isn't that amazing? What greater glory than fighting to the death?